Welcome to Teacher Yappy's math class. Today we are at lesson 2 on word problems involving excess and shortage. Let us recall what we have learned in lesson 1. In lesson 1, we have learned how to solve word problems involving two scenarios, where one scenario involves an excess amount and the other scenario involves a shortage amount. In today's lesson, which is lesson 2, we are going to look at word problems also involving two scenarios, but both scenarios will involve an excess amount. We are going to learn how to solve such word problems using two methods. The first method is logical reasoning and the second method is model drawing. Let us look at example 1. Example 1 here is actually modified from the problem situation in example 1 in lesson 1. In lesson 1, the problem situation involves two scenarios where one scenario involves an excess amount and the other scenario involves a shortage amount. In our example 1 here, we will have both scenarios involving an excess amount. Children's Day is around the corner. Miss Daisy wants to give some sweets to the students in her class, so she bought a packet of sweets. At first, Miss Daisy wants to give each student 4 sweets. If she does that, she finds that she has an excess of 10 sweets. Miss Daisy then decides to give each student 5 sweets instead. If she does that, she finds that she has an excess of 2 sweets. Based on the two scenarios which involve an excess amount, we are going to find how many students there are in Miss Daisy's class, as well as the number of sweets in the packet. Let us look at the first method of using logical reasoning. First, we look at the number of students in Miss Daisy's class. We do not know the actual number of students in Miss Daisy's class, so we will just extend the number of students using a dotted line until we come to the last student. This is a packet of sweets. She's going to distribute sweets from the packet to her students. In the first scenario, she's going to give every student 4 sweets. So she will give 4 sweets to the first student, 4 sweets to the second student, and so on until she has given 4 sweets to the last student. When she has done that, she finds that she still has an excess of 10 sweets. So now she wants to give every student 5 sweets instead. But since every student already has 4 sweets, all Miss Daisy needs to do is to give an extra 1 sweet to every student. So she will give 1 extra sweet to the first student, another extra sweet to the second student, and so on. And when she has given an extra sweet to the last student, she finds that she still has an excess of 2 sweets. That means the total number of sweets that she has used up will be 10 take away 2 equals to 8. Since every student received 1 extra sweet, if she has used up 8 sweets, that means there are 8 students in her class. The last student is actually the 8th student. So now we know that there are 8 students in Miss Daisy's class. We can find the total number of sweets in the packet using either scenario 1 or scenario 2. In scenario 1, every student gets 4 sweets. So if there are 8 students in Miss Daisy's class, the 8 students will get 8 multiplied by 4, which will give us 32 sweets. But there is still an excess of 10 sweets. So the total number of sweets will be 32 at 10, and that will give us 42 sweets. In scenario 2, every student gets 5 sweets. So if there are 8 students in Miss Daisy's class, the 8 students will get 8 multiplied by 5 equals to 40 sweets. However, there is still an excess of 2 sweets. So the total number of sweets in the packet will be 40 at 2, and that will give us 42 sweets too. Now let us look at the second method of using model drawing to solve the problem. We'll start our model drawing by drawing a bar model to represent the total number of sweets in the packet. Let us look at the first scenario where every student gets 4 sweets. So the first student will get 4 sweets, the second student will get another 4 sweets, and so on until the last student will get 4 sweets. After Miss Daisy has distributed the sweets, she found that she still has an excess of 10 sweets. So we move on to the second scenario where every student gets 5 sweets now. But since every student already has 4 sweets, Miss Daisy just need to give every student an extra 1 sweet if she wants every student to get 5 sweets now. So she'll give an extra 1 sweet to the first student, extra 1 sweet to the second student, extra 1 sweet to the third student, and so on until she has given the extra 1 sweet to the last student. And she finds that she still has an excess of 2 sweets. So the total number of sweets that she has given out to her students will be 8. Now let us analyze the model now and see how we can use the model to solve the problem. In the first scenario, every student gets 4 sweets and there is an excess of 10 sweets after that. In the second scenario, where every student gets 5 sweets, Miss Daisy will have to give every student an extra 1 sweet in addition to the 4 sweets that each student already has. After she has done that, she finds that she still has an excess of 2 sweets. That means the big gap here, which represents the total number of extra sweets that she has given out to the students, will be 10 take away 2, and that will give us 8. The value of the small gap is actually the difference in the number of sweets that each student gets between the first scenario and the second scenario. So in the first scenario, every student gets 4 sweets. In the second scenario, every student gets 5 sweets. So the difference will be 5 take away 4 equals to 1. So the value of the small gap is 1. Each small gap represents a single student. So to find the number of students is the same as finding the number of small gaps. To find the number of small gaps, we take the value of the big gap divided by the value of the small gap, which will give us 8 divided by 1, and that will give us 8. So the number of students in Miss Daisy's class will be 8. If we know there are 8 students in Miss Daisy's class, we can either use scenario 1 or scenario 2 to find the total number of sweets like what we have done before. Let us move on to example 2 so that we can understand the concepts better. In example 2 here, it is actually modified from the problem situation in example 2 in lesson 1. In lesson 1, the problem situation involves 2 scenarios where the first scenario involves an excess amount and the second scenario involves a shortage amount. In our example 2 here, we also have two scenarios. However, both scenarios will involve an excess amount. Mr. Simon is a farmer. He has bought some boxes to pack the oranges that he is going to harvest from his fruit orchard. If he packs 12 oranges in each box, he has 20 oranges left. If he packs 15 oranges in each box, he has 5 oranges left. So we can see that in both scenarios, they involve an excess amount. Based on both scenarios, we are going to find the number of boxes that Mr. Simon has bought, as well as the total number of oranges that he has harvested. Now let us look at the first method of using logical reasoning. This represents the total number of oranges that Mr. Simon has harvested. He packs 12 oranges into each box at first, and after he has continued packing all the boxes with 12 oranges each until the last box, he finds that he still has an excess of 20 oranges. So now he wants to pack 15 oranges into each box. But since every box already has 12 oranges, what Mr. Simon has to do is to pack another extra 3 oranges into each box. So he will pack 3 oranges into the first box, pack another 3 oranges into the second box, and so on until he has packed 3 oranges into the last box. After he has done that, he finds that he still has an excess of 5 oranges. So in other words, the total number of oranges that he has used up from the excess in the first scenario will be 20 take away 5, 15 oranges. Since he has to pack an extra 3 oranges into each box, with 15 oranges, he will be able to pack 15 divided by 3, and that will give us 5 boxes. So in other words, Mr. Simon has bought 5 boxes. So if we know that there are 5 boxes, then we can find the total number of oranges that Mr. Simon has harvested based on either scenario 1 or scenario 2. In scenario 1, every box contains 12 oranges. So if there are 5 boxes, the 5 boxes will contain 5 multiplied by 12, and that will give us 60 oranges. However, there is still an excess of 20 oranges. So the total number of oranges will be 60 at 20, and that will give us 80. Let us look at scenario 2. In scenario 2, every box contains 15 oranges. So if there are 5 boxes, the 5 boxes will contain 5 multiplied by 15, and that will give us 75 oranges. However, there is an excess of 5 oranges. So the total number of oranges will be 75 at 5, and that will give us 80 oranges too. Now let us go on to the second method of using model drawing to solve the problem. We will start our model drawing by drawing a bar model to represent the total number of oranges that Mr. Simon has harvested. So, in the first scenario, he packs 12 oranges into each box. So, there will be 12 oranges in the first box, 12 oranges in the second box, and so on until he has packed 12 oranges in the last box. After he has done that, he finds that he still has an excess of 20 oranges. Then we will move on to the second scenario where Mr. Simon now wants to pack 15 oranges into each box. But every box already has 12 oranges. So what Mr. Simon has to do is to pack an extra 3 oranges into each box. From the excess of 20 oranges in the first scenario, he will pack 3 oranges into the first box, 3 oranges into the second box, 3 oranges into the third box, and so on until he has packed 3 oranges into the last box. And when he has done that, he finds that he still has an excess of 5 oranges. So the total number of oranges that he has used to pack the extra 3 oranges into each box will be 20 take away 5 equals to 15. So we can see that from the model, in the first scenario, when Mr. Simon packs 12 oranges into each box, the excess is 20. In the second scenario, when he packs 15 oranges into each box, then every box will have to have an extra 3 oranges. And after he has finished packing that, he finds that he still has an excess of 5 oranges. So if we look at our big gap, which represents the total number of extra oranges that he has packed into the boxes, our big gap will be 20 take away 5, and that will give us 15. The value of our small gap will be 3. The value of the small gap is obtained by looking at the difference in the number of oranges per box between scenario 1 and scenario 2. In scenario 1, every box contains 12 oranges. In scenario 2, every box contains 15 oranges. So if we take 15 take away 12, then the value of our small gap will be 3. To find the number of boxes is the same as finding the number of small gaps. To find the number of small gaps, we have to take the value of the big gap divided by the value of the small gap. So we take 15 divided by 3, and that will give us 5. So in other words, there will be 5 boxes. If we know there are 5 boxes, we can either use scenario 1 or scenario 2 to find the total number of oranges. So in summary, in problems involving 2 scenarios where both scenarios involve an excess amount, the first step we need to do is to find the number of groups. We can find the number of groups using 2 methods, logical reasoning or model drawing. If we use logical reasoning, we analyze the 2 scenarios involving the excesses, and then we find the difference between the 2 excess amounts. After that, we divide this difference by the small difference per group, which is the difference in the number of sweets that each student gets, or the difference in the number of oranges in each box between scenario 1 or scenario 2. If we use model drawing to find the number of groups, then we will divide the big gap by the value of the small gap. The big gap is found by taking the difference between the bigger excess and the smaller excess. The small gap will represent the difference in the number per group between scenario 1 and scenario 2. Once we can find the number of groups, we can move on to the second step to find the total number of sweets or the total number of oranges based on the number of groups that we have found in step 1. Now, what we have learned in this lesson, the same concepts, we can use it to solve word problems involving 2 scenarios involving shortage amounts too. So if we have a problem situation where both scenarios involve a shortage amount, We will first find the number of groups using logical reasoning or model drawing. So if we use logical reasoning, we analyze the two scenarios involving the shortages and find the difference between the two shortage amounts. After that, we divide this difference by the small difference per group. If we find the number of groups based on model drawing, then the number of groups will be the value of the big gap divided by the value of the small gap. The value of the big gap is found by finding the difference in the shortage amount between scenario 1 and scenario 2. The value of the small gap is the difference in the number per group between scenario 1 and scenario 2. Once we have found the number of groups, we can move on to the second step to find the total based on the number of groups that we have found in step 1. Thank you for joining us in today's lesson. I hope you have learned something new today. Thank you.